So welcome everyone to our session. We are the Kawartha World Issues Centre, also known as KWIC, and our session is on connecting for change, intersections and opportunities for leaving no one behind. So firstly, a little bit about KWIC, who we are. So we connect people to global issues through local initiatives that can change how we understand the world and foster equitable and sustainable communities. We make change happen through three key program areas: community education, youth and in schools, and umbrella support. So firstly, community education. We inspire local and international participants to highlight the intersections of complex issues such as climate change, Indigenous rights, food security, water, gender equity, human rights, and global health, and more. Examples of this include the Sustainable Development Goals Project, which I will talk about soon, International Women's Day, the Gender Equality Project, and other partnerships and events. Youth and in schools. So we support youth through mentorship, direct programming, and leadership opportunities, and through partnership programs such as the TRACS Youth Program, which is the Trent Aboriginal Culture, Knowledge and Science Youth Program, and Youth Leadership and Sustainability Program that Will completed, the Youth as Agents of Change series that we held last fall, and the Sustainable Development Goals workshops that Margaret will be speaking to. And then for umbrella support, so KWIC nurtures and grows innovative community ideas under our charitable umbrella until they are self-sufficient. One of the best known examples that make an important impact in our community today are Green Up, the Kawartha Food Share, and Reframe International Film Festival. KWIC currently supports TRACS Youth Program, Youth Leadership and Sustainability, Trent Oxfam, and Sustainable Trent at Trent University in Peterborough. So yeah, that's a little bit about us. You can learn more on our website at KWIC.info. But before we get started, I also want to share that we have a Jam board that we invite everyone to contribute to. This is our whiteboard tool to share comments, questions, and insights that resonate with you from the sessions today. You can do so by simply adding a sticky note in the corresponding board for each of the presentations. So I will be presenting first, and then Margaret, and then Will, and following our presentations, we'll open it up to the floor for a 20-minute question and discussion period. And I have to apologize in advance that I live in a very busy intersection, so there will be ambulances. All right, Scott. So yeah, that was our agenda for today, which I just explained, and the link to the Jamboard is in the chat now. So with that, I will get into my portion of the presentation. So I called it Centering Indigenous Leadership in the Sustainable Development Goals, Localization, Relationship Building and Collaboration. And I'm the KWIC Program and Outreach Coordinator, as Eliana pointed out earlier. So many of you might know about the SDGs, but many of you may not. So here's a little overview of the SDGs. So they're the Sustainable Development Goals launched by the United Nations in 2015. This includes 17 interdependent SDGs, also known as the 2030 Agenda, because they are to be implemented by 2030. The 2030 Agenda sets the vision for global action towards achieving a more sustainable future for people and planet. The SDGs are balanced across three pillars of sustainable development: economic, social, and environment, with a focus on ensuring that the most vulnerable and marginalized groups in the population are not left behind. There are national strategies that member states form to advance these goals. Canada has one, you can look up, as well as subnational provincial strategies. I don't believe Ontario has one, and local strategies that Nogojiwanong, Peterborough has begun alongside other cities across Canada and across the world. So what localization means. since I put it in the title of my presentation. So localizing the SDGs refers to the process of defining, implementing, and monitoring strategies at the local level for achieving global, national, and subnational goals and targets. So with a combination of local governments and/or organizations taking local action and engaging their citizens to set and monitor SDG targets. So we've begun this process locally, and we engage local governments and First Nations, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. So this concept of leaving no one behind is at the heart of the SDGs. It aims to help combat discrimination, rising inequalities, and the root causes for groups that have been historically and continually left behind. The United Nations approach to leaving no one behind aims to prioritize the dignity of human beings and ensure the needs of the most vulnerable communities are met. The 5 key factors used to assess who is being left behind and why includes discrimination, geography, vulnerability to shocks, socioeconomic status, and governance. People at the intersection of these factors are usually the farthest left behind. So with that, I'll get into the Goals project. But firstly, to contextualize that, in 2019, we held a community forum with KWIC, ourselves, Green Up, and the Fleming College Office of Sustainability hosted Peterborough's first multi-sector forum on the SDGs called Understanding the UN Sustainable Development Goals, Canada's Commitment, and the Local Connection. The forum opened with an understanding of Indigenous knowledge as the original teachings of sustainability and concluded with 120 participants identifying 5 local key priority action areas for Nogojiwanong, Peterborough. So the project is called Advancing the SDGs in Nogojiwanong, Peterborough. That was birthed out of that community forum. So we centered our project around the principle of leaving no one behind and centering Indigenous leadership. So we formed 5 action teams based on our top 5 priorities identified at that forum. So the first is centering Indigenous leadership. Then no poverty, which means ending poverty in all its forms everywhere. Number 4, quality education, ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Number 6, clean water and sanitation, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. And finally, number 13, climate action, to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. These were our top 5 priorities for our community, and that's why we made 5 action teams based on them. And they were made up about 10 to 12 local representatives who are doing really great work in each of these areas. And I will talk about the Indigenous Leadership Action Team, which had a specific responsibility through leading the project and also informing the other 4 action areas so that we can center Indigenous leadership in the whole project. So the key activities of our project, the first one is creating educational and informational materials on the SDGs for the broader community. Built upon the work done at the 2019 SDG Community Forum, where we learned about the SDGs, identified our community's 5 local priorities, and began listing the local initiatives and organizations already working to advance each of the priority SDGs. Establish the 5 priority action teams focused on each of the identified goals. Build bridges with trusted local organizations who are already supporting our local priorities to connect their work to the SDGs if it's not already. And then host a second community forum in the end of February 2021, centered on the principles of leaving no one behind and centering Indigenous leadership. So the Indigenous Leadership Action Team had the most responsibility. So I was the coordinator along with another coordinator from Green Up, and supported this action team to ensure that we center Indigenous leadership in the project as a whole, to inform the other action teams of their First Nations perspectives on achieving these targets, and who is left behind from their perspectives, and asset mapping Indigenous specific resources and initiatives. Here are some examples of Indigenous perspectives on the priority SDGs, which you will find in this report that's on the left-hand side here. So for no poverty, for them, that means that when we all have what we need to take care of each other and our community, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, that's what no poverty means. Quality education, for them, it's really focused on land-based learning and achieving the Truth and Reconciliation 94 calls to action and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. There's a lot about quality education in both of those documents, and that we have the right to educate our own peoples and more. Then clean water. Water is life. Access to drinking water in Indigenous communities. As some of you may know, there's a community half an hour away from Peterborough that still doesn't have clean drinking water. Curve Lake First Nation that we were engaging most with this project. And then finally, climate action. So respect and reciprocal relationships is key. Also interconnectedness, that what we do harms, what we do to ourselves harms, the earth. And then natural laws. So the natural world has its own laws and we need to abide by those. So the 2021 Community Forum was amazing. So that was in the end of February 2021. KWIC and Green Up hosted this 2-day virtual community forum on Zoom entitled Centering Indigenous Leadership and Diverse Perspectives to Advance the Sustainable Development Goals in Nogojiwanong, Peterborough, and the Kawarthas. So that here we really shared about our project. So community members assembled to deepen their understanding of how to advance the SDGs in a way that leave no one behind and centers Indigenous leadership. Collectively, Indigenous leadership was identified as critical to our local efforts to advance sustainable development. We welcomed a diverse group of over 200 participants from near and far in 3 interconnected workshops. By the end of the forum, the urgent need to reach our goals was evident. We have 9 years remaining to achieve the SDGs, the 2030 Agenda, and there is much important work to be done. So we have 7 reports that came from this project. 5 of them are focused on the action teams, and there is a final project report and also an additional report created by our Indigenous consultants and elder advisor called the Indigenous Collaborative Programming Report there. And you can find them all on our website, which we will post a link to that in the chat. Oh no, this didn't get, that's strange. Sorry, this didn't get translated, but so this, I wanted to elaborate a little bit on this. Navigating the Road Ahead, Indigenous Collaborative Programming. So this offers an in-depth explanation on how to build and maintain relationships and partnerships with First Nation communities. This was written by our project's Indigenous consultants, namely Gary Pritchard from 4 Directions of Conservation Consulting, and Taylor, knowledge keeper and language speaker from Curve Lake, and Elder Phileas Williams, who is also a chief of Curve Lake First Nation. And I had some information there about wondering where to start when engaging Indigenous communities. And here it is. I forgot to change that. So if you're wondering where to start when engaging Indigenous communities, here are my 3 main suggestions. So firstly, educate yourself. Learn about Indigenous peoples, the treaties and history of the area. Research your responsibilities of being a good treaty partner from sources that are created by the Indigenous peoples themselves, where you are. And then when you're ready, make a first gesture. Reach out to someone from the community who's engaged in outside community relations. introduce yourself, explain your reason for your attendance or your reaching out to them. So your intentions, tell them transparently and respectfully. And if you want to ask them for their time or knowledge, be sure to give a gift that they can use in exchange, because for the relationship to be healthy, it must be reciprocal. After explaining what you want them to do, ask what their protocols are and what they would like in exchange. Often it's tobacco or sema. It's sacred and should not be bought, but grown and given. So that can make it a little bit more difficult. So maybe that's once you're in more relationship with people, we tend to give medicines, share them back and forth. Also, food is amazing. We definitely suggest getting together with food outside the COVID context. I know that can be a lot more difficult, but food is a great way to build relationships. Honoraria, make sure you pay them equitably for their work. That is huge. A lot of times people will not be paid, like especially Indigenous youth. And that's really important because it's our knowledge, our time, our experiences, our emotional labor. And also it can be a combination of these things. Like it's very important just to ask them for what they want. And I also want to note that different people in the community require different things. Like elders, for example, it will definitely require more than other folks in the community, chiefs, leaders in the community. And also there's a discrepancy between, chief and council First Nations who are part of reserves and general community members. So oftentimes it's not enough to just engage the chief and council. You have to have community engagement so that people from the community, traditional people who aren't engaged in that colonial band council government, will send their own people and knowledge keepers. So that's an important discrepancy to keep in mind. Then finally, maintaining the relationship is key. It's important to initiate relationships that you plan on keeping. Like any relationship, you need to maintain it because it requires time and work to show you really care and build trust. Ask what their protocols are on how to maintain the relationship. So that's my suggestions on where to start. And then finally, from this project, we have some recommendations for next steps that came from the final report. So this is just a brief synopsis of that. So firstly, recognize the local work that's already advancing the SDGs and our local priorities, although it may not be articulated as such in these organizations. This includes the need to develop a local framework with the community to measure this work. Then learn from and build upon this project, our project locally, to ensure future work advancing the SDGs, centers Indigenous leadership, and ensures no one is left behind. Use the SDG framework to build local capacity, strengthening community resilience and stability. Continue to raise awareness about the importance of the SDGs at the local level to further the outcome of the goals. And finally, explore cross-cutting approaches to implement the goals, taking into consideration synergies and co-benefits between them. They are all interconnected. So these are our recommendations for our community on next steps for advancing the SDGs and our local priorities. And finally, I want to share a little bit about the gender equality project, which we're leading right now. So this is called Advancing Gender Equality, SDG 5 in Nogojiwanong, Peterborough. So this really builds upon the project that we did last year. And SDG 5 is really, when we advance gender equality, we advance all other SDGs along with it. So that's why it was so important for us to really focus on this issue for women and gender diverse people. When we treat our women and everyone in a good way, then we will know how to treat the earth and everyone else in a good way. So the timeline for this project, it began in March 2021 and will end in March 2022, which it will end with our annual International Women's Day event. and it's funded by the Community Foundation of Greater Peterborough. And the goal of this project is to advance gender equality in our community through education and participatory action research on Sustainable Development Goal number 5, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. That is the UN language. We are adapting this language to include gender diverse people. So the outcomes of our project are to 7 intimate workshop conversations or focus groups with approximately 5 to 10 participants each, focused on identity and intersecting identities. And then we will compile our research and create a report on gender equality in our community. Then we will share this work at our annual International Women's Day event in March 2022. So the objectives of this project is to have these focus group sessions that will engage local women and gender diverse people to share their perspectives, stories, and lived experiences of gender equality and inequality, how these issues can be addressed to meet their specific needs, and the effects of COVID-19. Through these workshops, we'll create a living map of local feminist activities and services that support women and gender diverse people, collect data on priority issues and the underlying systemic causes of gender inequity that will be accessible through the Equal Futures Network map. This is an interactive map online where organizations can upload the work that they're doing and share that with folks across Canada. So we want to have this shared on that map, and also a living document locally that people can go to access and research those assets that we have in our communities to support them. So yeah, we are also, like, one of these focus groups will be centering Indigenous leadership with Indigenous leaders and those who are most often left behind. So that is as well bringing that thread in, really focusing on engaging those who have been the farthest left behind in our community, and also centering that Indigenous leadership piece with what does gender equality look like for the Indigenous community here locally. So that's everything I have for you today. Miigwech, thank you so much for your time. Happy fall equinox, and I will hand things over to Margaret.